Hello friends, TechManPat here. Today we are reviewing the ZOTAC Gaming GeForce RTX 4090 AMP Extreme AIRO 24GB GDDR6X graphics card. Priced in at 2,899 Australian dollaroos at your local PLE, links below of course. This ZOTAC AMP Extreme card is the latest build of the RTX 4090 to hit the shelves from ZOTAC. Now, it's powered by NVIDIA's ultra-efficient Adder Lace architecture, which includes DLSS 3, ray tracing, reflex boost, G-Sync, and a whole bunch of other cool features like the broadcast features. Now, they're available to other versions of NVIDIA cards, but obviously this one brings with it DLSS 3. This is a beast of a card in both performance and physical size, requiring a minimum 1000 watt power supply. That's this one right here, not just the RTX 3090, but the ZOTAC version, 4x8 pin PCIe plugs, or a single new 16 pin 12 volt HPVR power cable. It takes 3.5 slots in your gaming case. That's a lot of space, and in numbers that's 7.21 centimeters deep, 35.55 centimeters long, and 14.96 centimeters in height. It has 3 DisplayPort 1.4As, maxing out at 7,680 by 4,320 at 60 Hz, and 1 HDMI port 2.1A. And let's not forget the RGB, because this has a lot of it. So what has ZOTAC done to stand out from the other board partners, and how does this card actually perform? Well, let's find out in this review. Thanks for jumping in. Make sure to like this video if you did, and subscribe if you'd like to see more content like this. Let's get started by rolling the intro. What has ZOTAC done to this card? Well, here are the highlights. An air-optimized design. It is a love it or hate it look. I personally don't mind it. There's no sharp corners, but would I choose the look? Probably not. It has ZOTAC's iStorm 3.0 advanced cooling, and as you can see with Furmark, the temperatures are pretty darn good, and with 64 degrees at load on Furmark. Love it, happy days. Haven't really seen it go over 72, except on a very hot day. At load, this car is very quiet, and the 3 large fans, I will give props to ZOTAC. I'm impressed. They're very quiet, and I'm used to a fully liquid-cooled RTX 3090. This is done quiet. Now, the freeze fan stop and active fan control means you have complete control over the fan curve and the software, and it will turn its fans off when not under load. The card has the dual BIOS switch. You can load 2 different BIOS profiles and swap around as you need. It does need a restart when you do switch it, so it's not instant, but it's great for overclocking while having a backup, and of course creating a low power mode if need be. Not that I couldn't really figure out why I wouldn't want to run this at max. Furthermore, it has the Spectra 2.0 RGB lighting, which is compatible with external LED strips, and a metal die-cast RGB LED backplate, which really completes that look and actually provides a bit of heat dissipation. Now, to support the size and sheer weight of this card, we have a metal GPU support bracket that comes in the box. Great, thanks ZOTAC. And last but not least, the all-new Firestorm utility, which I really like. It has all the buttons you would expect and ability to overclock. I kind of had a hard time letting go of MSI Afterburner for like the last 15 years, but I really don't mind this at all, and it does the job. In regards to build quality, the card feels solid in the hand, the shroud feels well put together, and I feel quite comfortable handling the card without thinking I'm going to snap something or break something off. But what is the motto of this card compared to, let's say, the previous generations? Well, from what I can see, it's the bigger fans, the thicker heat pipes, more fins for obviously better heat dissipation, airflow. It's a more efficient design. It seems to be an iteration on the cooling platform, and I think it's a welcome one, even if the size is ridiculous. It does keep the card cool, and it keeps it pretty darn quiet. Now, how does the RTX 4090 compare, let's say, to the RTX 3090, which I also had it as a ZOTAC? Well, it's roughly 60 to 70% faster at 4K, which is absolutely impressive compared to when the 2000 series came out. The 1080 and the 2080 had a difference of 20 to 30%. It's almost 50% faster at 1440p, which is what I play at, and it's better at ray tracing. Obviously, it's got more RT cores, and yeah, it can play games at 60 frames and have ray tracing on. Fantastic. But then NVIDIA throws out path tracing in Cyberpunk, and we'll have a look at that in a second. And it has AV1 hardware encoding. Now, this is quite unique to the 4000 series. You see, the tech industry has been abuzz with chatter about AV1 encoding recently. I'm sure you've heard all about it, right? No, you probably haven't. There are bold claims about how it will revolutionize streaming video, gaming streaming, and the internet at large. AV1, not to be confused with AVI, is a relatively new video codec designed for video streams. It offers significant advantages over the ABC H.264 and HEVC H.265 codecs. Now, it's too early to tell how AV1 is going to take. The 4000 series is the first of the NVIDIA lineup to support it. We'll see if Twitch supports it. Now, before we get into specifications and performance, let's talk pitfalls of this card, and feel free to blame NVIDIA for this one. First of all, the power cable. The new standard means either buying a compatible PSU or utilizing the adapter. Now look, there's been a lot of talk about these adapters catching fire and being poor quality. Yes, if you fiddle around with it, I'm sure something could happen, but if you put it in once and leave it there, it should be all right. Make sure there are no bends in it. Make sure it's fairly straight when it pops out of the top of the card. I don't personally like the location of it. Maybe at the back would have been better, but it's already a long enough card. Then I'll be upgrading to a newer PSU that supports the new format soon. Now, speaking of PSUs, the power requirement for this AMP card is 1000 watts, which is a lot. You will need it, especially if you've got other peripherals running, and of course, any overclocking, well, you're going to be limited by your power supply. And lastly, size. It will not fit in most cases. It doesn't fit in mine, hence the lack of the front glass and the completely random pipe design behind it. It's unwieldy, I'm not impressed, but it is expected that you will have to redesign your case around this card. So be wary when you're buying this. It's not going to be a clean swap. I had a 3019 before, and that card is comparably tiny when you look at this as the 4090. Now, ZOTAC has added some flavor to this card, but have they actually made it any better? Well, let's talk specifications. We've got the RTX 4090 amp Extreme AIRO there on the left-hand side, and I've highlighted the green bits there that actually have increased over a standard reference RTX 4090. This is basically what the AMP Extreme AIRO has that the other card doesn't, and we'll have a look at that in more detail in a second. Now, looking at this chart, you can't really pinpoint the exact big differences except the ones in green, but the major differences is the new chip. It's the TSMC 4nm process, and what the 3090 had was a Samsung 8nm. Obviously, 8 to 4, that's half of the size, which means you can get more power out of a similar size, but the TDP is still 450 for both the RTX 4090 from ZOTAC and the standard reference 4090. So let's talk theoretical performance. When you compare the ZOTAC RTX 4090 amp to the base RTX 4090, we see about an average of 2.1% increase across the board in the amount of throughput there is. All the performance charts that you'll see today is from my setup, and that setup is a Ryzen 9 5950X. I am running on a Windows 11 machine at 64-bit, and the PSU is a Corsair RM1000. Obviously, the ZOTAC RTX 4090 is there. The resizable bar is off. It is running at PCIe 4 at 16, and there is no overclock. The UEFI is on, and it's on the latest driver as of making this video, 531.68. Now, a little note about Windows 11. If you are going into testing, if you want to compare it to my machine, then obviously Windows 11 will be the go-to. However, if you want to get the best performance, go to Windows 10. I had to test it on both, but I just wanted to stick to Windows 11 because that is the latest version of it. But to note, all my results are a little bit lower to someone who has the same setup with Windows 10. That is just an issue with Windows 11, and I've been trying to use this moment to figure out if there's anything I can do, but so far I've lost about 10 frames per run compared to Windows 10. All right, let's start with the benchmarks. 1440p ultra-wide max setting, no DLSS, Windows 11. This is the result. Assassin's Creed Valhalla, we're hitting 133. Good game, works really well, really smooth, no jitter, no issues. We've got the Iron Man tech demo just in the background here, and it's at 32 frames at all cinematic settings. Now, this is incredible. It's not even very well put together, but it's just a test demo that I really wanted to try because it's just absolutely gorgeous. Dead Island 2, the latest, is at 126. Apex Legends hits around 240. Far Cry is about 225. Resident Evil 2 at 232. Metro Exodus 126. I expected this one to perform better, and it doesn't look as great as I remember. I wish it looked a lot better. I imagine it must have. Gears of War 5, 173. F1 2019, couldn't get my hands on the latest one, at 215. Perfect. Greedfall 169. Borderlands 3, 120. I expected this one to be a lot higher, but I'm kind of thinking it's Windows 11. Call of Duty Modern Warfare is 262. Beautiful smooth gameplay. Warzone 2 is poor at 118 and drops to 90 in certain areas of the map. I blame Call of Duty. Need for Speed Heat 173. Far Cry 5 213. Very well optimized Ubisoft game. Assassin's Creed Odyssey 127. Final Fantasy 173, and Shadow of the Tomb Raider, as always, 143. Runs really well. Battlefield 5 239. Awesome! And Rainbow Six Siege at 375. It doesn't render ultra wide, so it's technically doing it at 16:9, and it's an esports title. Now, Grand Theft Auto 5 is at 194 at all max settings. Obviously, it again depends on how much stuff is happening on screen, but it seemed to be performing really well. And if you have a 240 Hz screen monitor, this will be great. I have one more test in here that I haven't included because it'll just skew all the numbers. Counter-Strike Global Offensive hit around 827 frames a second at 1440p ultra wide. Now on to on and off DLSS, 1440p ultra wide, all max settings. We got the DLSS on balanced in green and DLSS off in red. Atomic Heart, beautiful game. 240 with DLSS on, 150 with it off. I would say play it with DLSS, it was much smoother. Control, terribly optimized. I don't know why it's performing so badly. It's 80 on DLSS and 60 on DLSS off. I felt like the performance was okay, but the look wasn't that much better for the cost. Dying Light 2, 121 on DLSS and 66 on DLSS off. I'm not sure why it was that low, but 60 frames is playable, but something you wouldn't expect with a 4090. Red Dead Redemption with DLSS off hit about 35 frames a second. Interestingly, how weak the 4090 performed on this one for me, but once DLSS was on, an amazing 137. It was just beautiful, and again, it's on balance, so maybe there's just something that wasn't quite working well on that one, but nonetheless. Shadow of the Tomb Raider 143 as before, and 182 on DLSS on balanced, and Battlefield 5 80 with DLSS off and 120 with DLSS on balanced, and that's of course in single player, not multiplayer, because there's a lot more effects on single player than there is multiplayer. Now, as promised, Cyberpunk 2077 with DLSS 3 on balanced and path tracing and ray tracing, the most gorgeous game out right now because of the demo tech path tracing. It traces every single light. It doesn't have any pre-rasterized lights. It is absolutely lit up by the reality of the environment, and it's beautiful. Make sure to check out some YouTubers who have done a deep dive into this technology. It is amazing. So Cyberpunk 2077 with DLSS 3 off, path tracing on at 1440p ultra wide, hit 23 frames per second. When DLSS 3 gets turned on, we get 54 frames. And then let's look at ray tracing with the Psycho setting. DLSS 3 off is 41 frames a second. Not that much better than path tracing on, but definitely the look and feel of path tracing is better. And with DLSS 3 on, ray tracing on, it's 80 frames, completely playable. Lastly, Time Spy Extreme, which led me to discover the issues with Windows 11 versus Windows 10. Windows 10 gets about 2K more than this, which puts it in that 99th percentile. And of course, if you really want to do some, I suppose, benchmarking like this, just go with Windows 10. Other than that, the rest of the games played really well, and I'm happy to report I really loved it myself.
Now let's talk NVIDIA's DLSS 3, the AI-powered performance multiplier for RTX cards, enabling neural rendering for games and applications. Now, DLSS 3 builds on the company's lead in AI-accelerated super resolution techniques. We know NVIDIA is very good at, and they deliver very outstanding image quality and even up to 4 times the performance of pure brute force rendering. Now, DLSS has proven to work, and it's awesome. I think DLSS is one of the greatest innovations from NVIDIA in its recent history, even compared to ray tracing, because without DLSS, ray tracing is kind of redundant and waste of energy and performance loss. So far, DLSS 3 has received widespread support from the gaming ecosystem. I've seen over 35 games, and there's some applications in there integrated with this technology. So DLSS 3 brings one new feature, only available on the new 4000 series cards, a new optical flow accelerated capability called optical multi-frame generation, or just frame generation. Now, frame generation generates entirely new frames rather than just pixels, delivering an incredible performance boost. The new optical flow accelerator analyzes 2 sequential in-game images and calculates motion vector data for objects and elements that appear in the frame, but are not modeled by traditional game engine motion vectors. Now, this dramatically reduces visual anomalies when AI renders elements such as particles, reflections, shadows, and lighting, and so on. Pairs of super resolution frames from the game, along with both engine and optical flow motion vectors, are then fed into a convolutional neural network that analyzes the data and automatically generates an additional frame for each game rendered frame. Now, simply, frame generation holds back a frame, generates an AI one in front, and does this every couple of frames, and in some cases it can double the frame rate in game. Then combining the DLSS generated frames with the DLSS super resolution frames enables DLSS 3 to reconstruct 7/8 of the displayed pixels with AI, boosting frame rates by up to 4 times compared to without DLSS. Now, because DLSS frame generation executes as a post process on the GPU, it can boost frame rates even when the game is bottlenecked by the CPU. So, what's the cost of this new technology? Well, unfortunately, this process adds a lot of latency. Now, from my testing with Dying Light 2 and The Witcher 3, it seems to be about 10 to 15 more ms in latency for your computer. Now, here's the thing, there is also NVIDIA Reflex, which can reduce that a little bit, and I've seen it reduce it by about 3 to 5, which is incredible. NVIDIA Reflex synchronizes the GPU and CPU, ensuring optimum responsiveness for low system latency. Now, the thing is, latency is not great. However, there are situations where it's absolutely fine. And here's my thinking. If you're playing an esports title, frame generation is not for you. You're gonna potentially get artifacts, there's gonna be latency in the image, and it's not going to be for you. However, if you're playing a single player game like Dying Light or even The Witcher, where latency isn't gonna cost you the game or potentially a championship, frame generation is incredible. It can almost double the amount of frames you get in game, and unless you're using your mouse that is obviously tuned to your hand with the exact responsiveness that you remember in any other game, and you flick around the screen, you will not notice the latency. I don't think you can notice 10 to 15 latency on top of 60 or 70 that already exists with the game. If you add a controller to your PC, you will not feel this at all. So if you have a single player game and it's one of those non-shooty tooty ones, then frame generation is incredible, and I think it's only going to get better.
So in summary, the RTX 4090 performs incredibly in most games. However, there is a substantial cost to this card. At $2,899, this is a ridiculously expensive card when you can buy a PlayStation 5 for about $850 plus a TV. So you're looking at probably $1,500. Well, that is probably a little bit more expensive if you do some napkin math. However, if you are a hardcore gamer, an enthusiast who just wants to get the best hardware, this is it. Now, does ZOTAC differentiate themselves enough from a standard 4090 and or other brands? I think it does, just with the price. That's right, this is priced a lot lower than any other 4090 board maker. And this card has been extremely reliable and performed really, really well. The cooling is impressive and the performance is very similar to its other 4090 competitors. Now, if I compare this to other machines that I've looked up that are similar build to mine, my results were actually on par. So if you have a better CPU and a better system, you will get better performance out of this card. Unfortunately, it's kind of like your mileage may vary. However, if you get a 4090, you're gonna expect some really good performance. Personally, this has enabled me to play some amazing games at the highest qualities that I have not been able to experience before. The 3090 was just not keeping up with ray tracing, path tracing, another story. The industry is moving so fast, but I'm sure path tracing will get to a point that's very efficient on these cards with more software updates. So in the past, people used to say finally 1080p gaming, then finally 4K gaming at 30 frames, and then 4K 60 frames gaming, and then ray tracing came out and you're like, well, what do we do now? Well, with this card and DLSS, 4K gaming with ray tracing is absolutely possible at 60 frames a second. However, you'll be spending a lot of money. Big thanks to PLE and ZOTAC for making this review possible. Big thanks to you for watching. Let me know your thoughts below. Let's make sure to like this video if you did. And if you want to support this channel, subscribe. It really does help. You'd be really surprised. Thanks for watching and I'll catch you all in another one. Bye!